kind of moving on, once you've got this performance measurement data, right? The age-old thing you end up with is trying to map who your best performing talent or high performing talent is. And often you end up with this bell curve. One end you've got your low performers, let's say, and the other end you've got the high performers, and everyone else is in the middle. Do you think that bell curve still works?
No, absolutely not. And you know what the crying shame is? There are so many businesses right now who are employing that, who are putting that into place and tarnishing quite a few things within their workforce, like innovation, teamwork, collaboration, and more. And a bit of a history lesson on the bell curve. Exactly as Nelson mentioned, imagine this graph and imagine all your people pivoted like a bell in this line. Right, you have your middle, your bottom end, your top end. Now, actually, this dates back all the way to the 1700s from statistical data analysis, where they needed to identify lower and top end anomalies. That's where it started. It then shifted into education, particularly with engineer examination, where they'd find a mean score of the engineering exam test, and they'd have the outside anomalies, the lower anomalies, and those will be the top and bottom, and these will be the average, okay? In an environment where everybody's completely siloed and individualistic, my own exam, my own success, perhaps this can be a bit more effective. But then in the 1990s, it was then introduced into the corporate world by a company called GE, and was quite largely successful for a few years. And remember, this is 30 years ago. Things were very different 30 years ago. There's a lot of things we talk about today which would never even be muttered out of anyone's, And so the world has changed. And what we have now are companies who have actually used it. So I've actually done some more research. Microsoft used it. Google used it, Cisco used it, and more. And they've all gotten rid of it. They've all completely dropped it. And why? I'll take you to a case study with Microsoft, sorry. They had it, and it's documented now as the lost decade. It's documented as a lost decade where their innovation, their team working, their culture completely plummeted. And as management reported it, went completely toxic. Because what happens when you start to naturally pick people off? Because what a bell curve is designed to do, it's actually a method of comparing employees against each other. Now, in an environment where we're so project-driven, team-focused, collaborative needed, is that the right approach? Do you build the right culture that will thrive when you are pitting equals against each other? Am I going to work with you as best I can when I know at the end of the day, in this conversation, I'm going to be compared to your success versus mine. I've got to do better than you. That's not teamwork. That's not driving innovation. That's not going to create an incredible company that's going to compete in the market. And there's actually a saying, a quote actually I found from a leader that was at Microsoft for 12 years, 30 plus years experience, CEO, founder, investor, and quote unquote, the bell curve appraisal is an unnecessarily aggressive invention that damages human relationships. In large organizations, politics take over. So if your company are doing bell curves, AKA forced distribution, where they've agreed we're 100% going to have 20% in the bottom pile, and they're going to be put on a PIP or exited, and we're 100% going to have 10%, I would strongly recommend you stop doing that. I would strongly recommend you put some data together to show why that's not a good idea. And if you take Microsoft's case, these are the years when Apple completely leapfrogged them with innovation, with team working. And this is why it's so documented that this just doesn't fit today anymore due to the nature and changing world of our work.
And what does the alternative look like, Ronnie?
And we've alluded to it a few times here. It's 360-degree feedback. So you can actually trust the feedback you're getting, the overall picture of an employee, rather than having to go, this arbitrary score we've given people, let's notch it down one. That makes more sense. And it's done by someone who hasn't seen your role, doesn't know what work you're doing, but needs to make the numbers work. So getting a true 360-degree process that you can believe in, stand by in, managers that are trained to go and do this process, employees who are trained and bought in, ensuring frequent and effective one-to-ones, training managers on feedback giving, goal setting, and how to do a skills assessment using your new platform you've just introduced of all the proficiencies of where people are, and ensuring employees are trained on all these things too. we end up over focusing a bit on the managers, but we also need to make sure our employees know how to navigate this, know how to set their own goals. And actually what I would say is the way they create bell curves is by giving these arbitrary performance scores. And it's not scientifically created, which is the problem. If it was scientifically created and the performance scores weren't severely adjusted, which what happens to make the numbers meet, then it maybe wouldn't be so bad. But the whole premise of it is a forced distribution. So 360-degree performance reviews, continuous feedback, frequent one-to-ones, training managers, employees on feedback, goal setting, skills assessment, embedding this into the culture of your business and having this as a continuous process that happens all throughout the year. So we're constantly seeing where they are in terms of their goals and where they should be versus where they are in terms of the skill proficiency at the role and level they're in.